I want to welcome you to my talk. It's yes, you can raise your hand now. I gave him the job of raising his hand anytime I say so or at the beginning of the sentence. So, we're going to talk about building kick-ass internal education programs. Sometimes when you don't necessarily have a mandate from your boss or from the organization. But it's important, right? We need to be able to build these programs, and we need to be able to educate ourselves. And so we sometimes have to just do it. I have one thing, though, before we start. I want you to know that if I raise my hand like this, or if this fellow down here raises his hand, I want you to raise your hand as well. So let's practice this really quick. Yeah, that's very good. Okay, good. This is how I'm going to get your attention. Usually it means it's time to shut up, but not always. But we're going to do some activities, and I have to get your attention somehow, so that's effective. For now, I would like you we've been sitting all day, right? And how can you keep your brain going if you're sitting? So I want you to stand up and take a 3-minute stretch break, if you're able to stand, and introduce yourself to your neighbors. So we have 3 minutes. You guys are so good at that. This is really great. One of my favorite things about that activity is that every time I do something like that, people tell me, nerds won't do activities. They won't stand up. They won't talk to each other. That's crazy. And every time it goes over gangbusters. In fact, I think we gained 50 people just because we were making tons of noise. That's good. We're going to talk about inspiration. Partly. Every RailsConf, I go for the inspiration track. They don't actually have that listed, but there's always clearly those talks. I'm going to try and inspire you to take action on education at home. I have a 1-point takeaway, because you've been, how much knowledge can you really retain in a day of conferencing? So I want you to remember one thing, and that's that internal education is easy. I'm going to start it on Monday. Hopefully, you'll be able to say that by the end of the talk. The 2-point takeaway, because there's slightly more content, is that you don't need to know everything to teach. And also that education isn't particularly expensive or hard to do. I make it look difficult because that's how I get paid. But you don't have to do it that way. So I had a number of titles that my wife vetoed. One of them was covert education, sneaking in education without them knowing. I also had how to educate when you don't know what the hell you're doing, which is very true. But like I said, they got vetoed. So like I said, my name is Chuck Lauer Vose. I have bright hair. You can find me around the conference if you have questions about education. I like ferrets, food, photography. I wish photography had an F because I'm kind of like that. I was the founder of the Portland Code School, and I'm an education engineer at New Relic. Also, I like magnets and ponies, and pets wearing clothes. And my coworkers are jerks. But I love them. So first, I want to start and talk about some inspiration for myself. Kira Matsuda, who I don't know if he's in the room at the moment, but was just doing a talk over there. 2 years ago, I saw him at Ruby on Rails. And the thing that was so cool was that at the time, this was, I guess this was 2012, he didn't speak a lot of English. And he decided he wanted to talk through code, because it was our common language, right? And he was very nervous. He was incredibly nervous. But the thing he did by accident was he very clearly demonstrated what he expected of the audience. What he said at the beginning of his talk is, said, every time I pause, I want you to reassure me by clapping. And so I want to ask you to do the same thing. This is my first talk, and I'm a little nervous, I'll be honest. So every time I have like you see like a big title slide or something, or every time I pause and look nervous, I want you to just like applause the shit out of me. And I think that'll be really helpful for me. Thank you so much. That was so much better than I had planned. Okay, so I want to talk about how I got started in education. And unfortunately, it's an incredibly embarrassing story for me. How many of you know EVE Online? All right, so you all know that this is the nerdiest MMO game, commonly referred to as spreadsheets in space. So that's how I got started teaching. And the reason is that, this is the sort of common learning curve thing. EVE is the black line with the dead bodies everywhere. And it's so true. In fact, it's so difficult to learn. There's an entire alliance of, I think, last count, 2,000 people all educating each other because it's just that damn hard. Well, not satisfied to just join eUni, or the EVE University, I wanted to do my own thing. They weren't doing what I wanted to do at the time. So I started my own guild, and we got 80 people, which I think was a huge success. We had weekly speaking events by prominent PvP players. But it was the first time I'd done public speaking ever. And I have to say that was way more intense and way more addicting than space piracy or PvP. Just so scary. After that, I apparently added in a lot of animation slides. Burnside Digital was a 40-person company. This is actually at work now. But education was not a thing. It was something that I had to sort of hack in around the edges. I still, at this point, didn't realize I was educating, but I was doing things like lightning talks and little jazzmurals. So I started small, and I tried to share success with other people, and it actually went really well. By the end, we had lightning talks that the entire company came to and were wildly heralded. And we started seeing other things popping up, like pair programming workshops and other cool things. So it was really neat to not have any mandate to do this and still find ways to take a little bit of time each week. And as it was successful, it grew, and we got more financing, and we were able to buy lunch for everyone. And it was just cool to demonstrate that success. Sort of still at that school, or at that company, Burnside Digital, I started an intern program gone terribly wrong. And I say it went terribly wrong because it was supposed to be 3 people every 3 months and ended up being 17 people shortly afterwards. But I still didn't know how to teach. I still had no idea. In fact, I think I had only barely accepted the fact that I might be educating at that point. But I had a really smart guy talk to me in the beginning, and he said that an educator, at least in the math and technologies, is not someone who knows everything. It's someone who creates a space where people can learn. I think that's such a crazy difference of thought to realize that they weren't expecting me to know all the things. Just to set up a place where people could go and read their book and get it done right. And I can definitely say that PCS was the most inspiring experience of my life, definitely the most proud. I'm still connected to all the students. And it's still kind of, I don't know if it's the highlight of my life. It kind of makes me sad to think that might be in the past. But I wonder what I go towards in the next. Now is different, though. I work for New Relic, and New Relic really cares about education. And I didn't quite know how much they cared about it until month 6. But so I work on building internal education for engineers. They're way smarter than me, like terrifyingly, frighteningly smarter than me. And I can't teach them anything. I literally don't know anything more than that. But I can create a space for learning. And I can help do some things that allow engineers the extra time to get back to their day life. Like, they can communicate to me, and then I can build curriculum for them. So I can do things there. And I can help organize events, too, which is a huge time sink for most engineers. Believe it or not, engineers are not good at organizing events for the most part. So that's something I can do. So this was our mandate when I first talked to them at New Relic. Make the already awesome engineers at New Relic awesomer. Like, oh, that's cool. That's a cool. Holy shit. I don't know how to do that. Like, I've been applying here for 10 years. I can't, like, I want to come here so I can level up. Wow, that's super intense. I totally have to recommend that. That's like the best tactic ever. Okay, so you don't need to know everything. That's the one thing I want you to take away from this. Well, okay, that's one of the three. I kind of lied. You don't have to know everything. You need to be passionate and inspiring, and you need to give of yourself in this activity. I still have no idea what I'm doing. I'm learning it too, and you can do it. Okay, activities. So I want you to spend 30 seconds thinking about an effective education experience from your past. I want you to share this with your neighbor. 2 minutes. I'll raise my hand. Wow, that was like half the time. You are continually impressive to me. So, okay, so a good educator pushes people out of their comfort zone. I know that most everyone else, I haven't seen another presentation where people have forced you to talk to people. And I think it's important. So I really like that quote, and I like this image in general. If we're growing, we're always going to be out of our comfort zone. So in some ways, you know, we talked about an educator as just someone who creates an effective space for learning. And part of that is pushing people. You saw me walking around, and if anyone wasn't talking, I'd force them to talk to me, which is way scarier. So I think that's a huge part. Who knows these guys? Yeah. Everyone, this is Bill Nye and Neil deGrasse Tyson. I didn't know Neil deGrasse Tyson when I was a kid, but Bill Nye I sure as hell knew. And I really love how much they inspire people. That seems to be their main thing now, right? I know Neil deGrasse Tyson at least still has a classroom somewhere, but I don't know where it is. His primary thing for me is just the inspiration to continue learning. He keeps exposing me to new things about space that I never thought about before. And for me, when I educate you, I'm going to expose you to the idea that you could, in fact, do these things. You could be the teacher. And I hope that when you go home and talk to people, you'll inspire them to learn the code that you're thinking about. The last thing I think a good educator does is gives of themselves out of love. And I think this really applies to the open source community as well, and the open source ethic. And this is partly a preparation for you that education may take some time outside of work sometimes. But so does open source. And I can tell you that it's worth it. So turn to your neighbor and give him a high five. I I don't think this would work in many other communities in the Ruby community. So I actually thought about making that activity applaud for the next thing only by using your neighbor's hand. So that'd be very difficult. So. How many of you have seen this XKCD strip about nerd sniping? If you haven't, so I taught my wife this a little while ago, that so nerd sniping is where you just sort of you say one little thing that forces someone to just spawn off like a number of different thought processes. It's basically a mental fork bomb, if you know that term. And one of the best ways, and this is a very dangerous tool, I'm giving you very powerful tools here. One of the best ways to do this is to say, hey, Joe, what's the most efficient way to do whatever? It doesn't even matter. What's the most efficient way to sweep the floor? They're done. So efficient is this funny word. I'm talking about being an efficient educator. And so I apologize in advance because I hope this destroys you. Mostly I'm going to talk about some, one of the things you mentioned was how do you create a space conducive to learning? Is it a physical space? Is it an actual thing? Like, do you have to have a classroom? And the answer is no, it is not generally a physical space. However, it does tend to involve some real estate somewhere. But it could be mixed-use space. It could be the couches, whatever. So the first one, my most favorite, the place I started was lightning talks. And the thing I've seen work the most was 30 to 60 minutes before lunch on Friday. And the reason I think that works is that as you finish the talks, people can continue their discussion through lunch. Very effective. The other thing is that if it goes well, you can move it back by 30 minutes and get your company to buy lunch, thus increasing your happiness and your number of people coming, which is great. Lightning talks are super easy to do. You just need to find a couple people who can do 5 to 10-minute talks on whatever. I've seen effective lightning talks done with no technical content. I would recommend some technical content, just for reasons. But I've seen lightning talks that were very well received on homebrewing. In fact, I've seen entire presentations on homebrewing. I've also seen really effective ones where you demo a product, especially if you have a big thing like New Relic. It would be really useful to me if I could just see one person's take on one feature every week. I might actually make it through my product by the end of 3 years. It's so big. But also showing off a new gem, or just generally inspiring the people around you. Education is so much about inspiring people. You can't force someone to learn, right? You can sit them down if you have the mandate, but they don't have to learn unless they really want to. So it's all about inspiration. The last pro tip I have for you about lightning talks is that if you bring food, they will come. It's great. So that's how we ended up with a whole company faithfully showing up every single Friday to an event that involved sitting on the couches, which I realize is probably not that hard of a proposition. But so the other one, some of my coworkers have been working on this recently, mob refactors. In fact, Kewu was the person who introduced me to this idea that you get everyone in a room, pick some bit of code you really want to hack on, and everyone hacks on it together. It's important to review the code, not the author, because that can be really offensive to the author, especially if they're in the room. And if they're not in the room, that could just be bad in general. But you rewrite the code together, and this is the part that kind of blows my mind. You throw it out afterwards. It's like mind maps. They're not really that helpful after the fact. And the code you write during a mob refactor is probably bad. But the conversation you have during a mob refactor is very good. So this has been working really well for us. And in fact, looking back on it, I saw groups doing this, but it wasn't called mob refactoring. I didn't know what it was called then. I just saw them doing it, and it being really effective. Pair programming is something that everyone knows they're supposed to be doing, right? But none of us do, because it's hard. And the thing people don't talk about is that pair programming, to me, is a trade-off of speed for quality. And I think that's really important. So if you find yourself or your product in a place where things are not going as smoothly as you would like, I don't know if anyone's had that problem, pairing may very well be one of the big power tools to look at. So I have two sneaky little methods to get pairing happening, because I know a lot of you have tried getting your company to pair. You've tried like getting a manager mandate, and they can't make it happen. There's two methods that have worked well at New Relic. So the first one is my method. It's called the sneaky monitor. And what you do here is you set aside some time, like you make an appointment with your teammate, and you literally bring your monitor to their desk. And it's annoying, because then you're going to sweep like half of their shit off their desk. And then at the end, you try and be a nice citizen. You help them like put all the things back in order, and you know, maybe it's the first time their desk has ever been dusted, but that's cool. It's nice. And then the next week, you come back again, and you sweep all the shit off their desk and put your monitor there. And by the third week, you know, maybe they just haven't put their desk back into shape, and you just plop your monitor down. And by the fourth week, you find a little monitor there. You're like, oh, that's nice, thank you. And then by the fifth week, you've got an actual monitor there, and you thank the IT people, and then you go find someone else and start it again. And it sounds silly, right? Like you can only touch one person at a time, but then they start taking their monitor somewhere after they've seen the fun of it, and then you've got two people doing it. And I've seen this happening at New Relic to both great effect and great detriment, because we're totally out of space. And now I see these monitor like pairing stations popping up everywhere, and the management is pissed at me because I've taught them pairing. And so there was another cool method that came up recently that I really like. This is Emily's method, Emily Highland in the Insights team. And what she recommended was sending out an open invite to anyone who wants to try pairing to bring their monitor to the lunchroom, and I'll find you a buddy to work on for that 1 hour or whatever. We'll talk about some style, something you can practice, and then go to town. That's it. It's a great way to get those who are already interested in it going, because they don't have friends who they can do it with on their team maybe. So they can't practice, and therefore they can't know well enough how to convert their teammate. They just don't know enough yet. It's a great idea. There's only a couple more. So workshops, I mentioned these. Basically, you pick a theme. We did this maybe a week ago on refactoring, and it was so cool. So Katie Miller picked a topic, some RailsCast on the service object pattern. So we all watched the RailsCast. She showed us like 10 minutes of her code where she tried to apply that, and we talked about it a little bit. And then for 40 minutes, we paired on trying to do that on a random snippet of code to various effect. Sometimes it didn't work, sometimes it did. But it was really cool. And then for the last 20 minutes, we came back together and we all demoed. And it was so, I feel like I got 2 days of education out of that hour and a half. And it was shocking to me. I mean, not only was I exhausted afterwards, which maybe not super great, but I really felt like I learned a lot. And it's an education experience I had never had before. I'd never tried this. So it was really cool. Thank you. I have to tell you, I've been rushing a little bit because I was worried if I paused long enough that you're going to clap at me again. I feel like this is actually ideal, though. I would rather feel embarrassed by how often someone is clapping than the opposite. So this is good. So this one I've only seen a couple times at New Relic, but it was amazing. This was literally one of the most amazing things I have ever seen or experienced. And it was a total accident. They had no idea they were doing it. I only later found out it has a name later. Basically, all of our smartest engineers got around a table, like they usually do. But this time, there were too many of them to have the discussion, so they did it in our lunchroom. And our lunchroom has 2 monitors that are paired together, and it's also open enough that anyone could hear. So they were sitting around the little table talking. And what I noticed is that there was a growing crowd of about 40 people listening and looking at the second monitor, the paired monitor. And they were discussing amongst themselves. They were clarifying the concepts because The super nerds were over here talking about this really hard concept, and we were just trying to understand what the hell they were talking about. But it was really cool to hear our elders speaking. Like, what do they worry about during the day? I don't know. And also these conversations are normally like closed door. You don't normally have any impact in this. And so being able to like sort of listen in was definitely like one of the most enlightening and eye-opening things I think I have seen in a long time. So I would highly recommend something like this. And I think this works for anything. I think this works at the director level. Like, as long as you're not talking about employees, I would love to hear what your VPs or your executives are talking about. Super cool. And then I think this is second to last one, but the last real one. So the last one, I had never heard of this concept, but now that I see it in effect, I love it. Basically, when you get a new hire, assign someone to them for a day. It's nothing big. Maybe if you have the resources, you can assign someone half-time for 2 weeks, or maybe even 4 weeks. And what I can tell you is that if you do that, when New Relic onboards, we think it takes about 6 months for someone to truly get up to speed. And I actually agree with this. What we've found is that if you have an onboarding buddy helping you through that first month, it drops to about 3 months, which is crazy. You get one engineer's half-time for 1 month, and that's 3 months of extra productivity. That is money. That is a lot of money. Huge difference for us. So we now do this 100% of people come into New Relic, and they have a person guaranteed for 4 weeks, if not 2 people, dedicated to them in addition to their team. And one of them is usually me. So very cool. The last one, dedicated trainers. I wouldn't recommend it. I mean, unless you have a lot of people, or the quality of trainings is like absolutely critical, or but it's just the dedicated trainers have to be crazy efficient. And so if you're at the size where you have 200, 300, 400 people, yeah, all right, dedicated trainer time. But most of us aren't there. Most of us are 40-person companies, right? Yeah, I'm just reading the slides. Sorry, I forget what these are. Yeah, turn to your neighbor. Talk very, very briefly, not 3 minutes, about what these have tried, or which of these you've tried and which you think would work in your org. And I'll tell you the secrets. I'm sorry, we had to cut that one short. I'm running out of time. It's all the clapping. Okay, my plan for your organization. If you do this, you will have education, and I will be happy and pleased with you. As if you need to work for my pleasure. So I want you to next week, next Friday at 11:30, I want you to do lightning talks. It's the easiest thing you can do. It's super easy to find 3 people who want to talk. They need to make 3 slides. How hard is that? Also, I want you to ask your team to review your code at some point. If you're willing, bring some snacks, and they will like it a lot better. Third one, set aside some time for pairing. Bring your monitor. You know the sneaky monitor trick now. And also, I think the next time you have a new hire, try it. I think you'll find that it's an immensely pleasurable and pride-filled endeavor. For this activity, I would like you to say these things on the screen. So I'm going to count to 3. Yes, thank you. I'm going to count to 3, and then we're all going to say this thing. All right. 1, 2, 3. Internal education is easy. I'm going to start on Monday. Yeah, excellent. I am fulfilled. You know the 2-point takeaway. You don't need to know everything. You can teach right now. Education isn't expensive or hard to implement. Chuck just makes it look that way.